Welcome back to Close Up. One of the changes in the state in 2024, Concord got a new mayor. Former city councilor Byron Champlin became the Concord's 57th mayor. Like other leading New Hampshire cities, the mayor needs to tackle issues from housing to infrastructure and, of course, residents' property tax burden. So welcome to Close Up, Mr. Mayor. First time on the show.
And it's my pleasure. Thanks very much, Steve.
No, I have to ask, obviously, you've just entered the office in the last year. I'm sure you have a to-do list. I have to imagine housing is either at the top or very, very high up when it comes to what you need to tackle.
Well, I challenge you to talk to a mayor in New Hampshire for whom housing is not at the top. I mean, we've been working very, very hard on housing. We have about 2,300 housing units that are either being completed or have been approved or in the pipeline. And if we achieve all of that is constructed, it'll represent about a 12.1% increase in housing units in Concord. We're very proud. Just recently, we were one of 18 housing champions named by the state BEA. And we're very proud of that. And that's because we have made a real effort to create affordable housing as well as to encourage all types of housing for our folks. We are in the central New Hampshire region, and there are 20 communities in that region. Out of those 20 communities, Concord provides 58% of the affordable housing, even though we only have 36% of the region's population. And there are 8 of those 20 communities who provide no affordable housing. So we're very proud of that. We're proud of the state recognition. We also received $1.14 million from Invest New Hampshire in recognition of the affordable housing that we've created. But our housing vacancy rate is 0.4%. A healthy vacancy rate is 5%.
Yeah.
So we're still working at it. We're still talking to developers, and we're still trying to partner with them to create more housing.
Now, for Concord, it's unique in that, obviously, you're also the capital. Does that play a role in how much land is available to you or how much is on the tax rolls that other cities don't have that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. Probably almost between 25 and 30% of the property in Concord is not, the taxable property is not taxed. It's either owned by the state or it's owned by nonprofits. And that's a large percentage. And that means that a heavy part of the tax burden has to be borne by our commercial and property tax payers. So that is a challenge. But it's one that we're used to. We're very honored to be the state capital. We fought 100 years ago or so to remain and to be the state capital, so we appreciate that, and we appreciate the business that it does bring. On the other hand, it is a challenge for us. I mean, the office where I worked for 27 years in Concord was recently sold to the state to be used for the new Justice Department offices. So that property went off the tax rolls. That's why economic development, broadening the tax base in Concord is so important to us.
Yeah, I know one of the things you said in your speech when you were first get put into the role was you were talking about respecting the taxpayer's burden. You lived in the city for 40 years or so, or you've been in the city there. What do you do to alleviate property tax concerns? Obviously, I'm sure that's something you hear from constituents all the time.
Oh yeah, and I think what we're seeing throughout the state is property taxpayers, really feeling significant pain, and particularly property taxpayers who are on a fixed income like I am. I'm a retiree, and I'm very fortunate that I work for a company that took care of me, and and we were prudent and careful. But a lot of people are living on the edge, and so we have to be very careful as city officials about what we spend money on and how we create our budgets. I mean, I'm very proud of the fact that Concord has a well-managed budget. We ended up fiscal 2024 with a $1.4 million surplus. We passed a balanced budget for fiscal 2025, which is what we're in now. But we face the stresses that everyone else does. For example, we're challenged to hire police officers and firefighters and even snowplow drivers. We're in competition with every other city and town in the state to hire people. I've been on the city council. I'm just wrapping up my 11th year, and we've never had a fully staffed police department because people, we have never lowered our standards. We do a great job of recruiting talented people. Unfortunately, they're very attractive to other communities as well. And policing is changing. And also, so is firefighting. They're both dangerous. In policing, in the post-George Floyd era, they're under a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
And people don't think of them as highly as they used to. And so it is challenging to recruit those. And part of that recruitment, to get to your original question, is we have to offer competitive salaries. And about 75% of our general fund is salaries and benefits for employees. So trying to balance that, you're right, is a challenge.
Yeah, the calculus is hard. Another thing that many cities across the state are facing is the issue of homelessness, too,
Yes.
kind of on the extreme edge of the housing conversation. What's the situation in Concord right now?
Well, Concord, we cannot get a firm number of the number of homeless that we have. I wish we did. My goal is someday we have a by-name census. It's a challenge doing that. And by that I mean we know exactly who the homeless are in our community. We do know that there are about 316 homeless in Merrimack County. A high percentage of them, no doubt, live in Concord. I think that we as a city really respond to homelessness with firm compassion. Our police department is extremely engaged with the homeless population, as well as all the social service agencies that deal with the homeless population. We do have a subcommittee of our public safety advisory board on which the fire department and the police department sit, who are looking at the safety issues around homelessness. But homelessness is a national problem, a national challenge. And it is a complex challenge because, in Concord, probably 2/3 of the homeless have some sort of mental health issue. And maybe half of them have a substance abuse issue. And sometimes those things go hand in hand. That's something that no municipality can tackle on their own. And so until we get a response on the state level, and maybe even on the county level, to provide appropriate mental health services, because we deinstitutionalized people generations ago. But we have, we closed down the large state mental health facility in Concord with the promise that mental health services would be provided in the community. And that's not being done right now. So until we have that kind of support, and until we have more housing units, then we're not going to really be able to eliminate homelessness or significantly reduce it. But we are trying in Concord. We are working together in Concord to try to address this. We just had the vigil a few nights ago for recognizing those who have died in homelessness. I think one of the important things to remember is that many of the people who are in the homeless population are our neighbors. We're seeing more elderly people with disabilities or health issues coming into homelessness. They're the people who are walking into our welfare office. And as Concord becomes more popular as a place to live, and the cost of living there increases, more and more people are threatened with falling off, pushed
to the
out
edge
of their housing, right, and into homelessness. So it's something that we're definitely working on. But as I say, it's a big challenge, and it's a challenge that needs a national, state, and maybe even county response.
Yeah, we can see how it's all interconnected. Circling back to where we started with housing, Mr. Mayor, thanks so much for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Great. And when we come back, we'll be here with the mayor of Portsmouth right after this.